Calends of October, 51 before our era. The forest floor of Gallia Comata is a cold, damp sponge under a sky the color of bruised slate. You are deep within the Carnute woods, a place where the oak trees are so ancient and their boughs so tangled that they seem to hold the sky captive. The air is thick with the scent of wet leaves, wood smoke, and something else, something older. A metallic tang, like blood on a ritual stone. Here, time is not measured by the rigid march of numbered days. It is felt. It is tasted in the wind, seen in the phases of the pale moon, and heard in the rustle of a boar in the undergrowth. This is the domain of the druids, the keepers of secrets, the astronomers of the soul. At the heart of a clearing stands Morvran, his face a roadmap of 60 winters, his eyes the color of moss on granite. His robes, once white, are stained with the earth and herbs of his trade. He is not alone. Gathered before a series of 19 bronze plates, arranged in a complex pattern on a low stone altar, are the chieftains of the Eadui, the Sequani, the Arverni, men whose names are spoken with reverence and fear. Their cloaks of dyed wool are heavy with the morning dew, their hands resting on the hilts of iron longswords. Morvran's gnarled finger traces a spiral on the Coligny calendar, his lips moving in a silent chant. This is their clock, their guide, a 5-year map of the heavens, charting the dance of sun and moon. It is a living thing, a sacred pact between the gods and the earth. It tells them when to plant, when to feast, when to make war. But this year the pact feels strained. The signs are conflicted. The moon of Equos was bloated and red. Morvran's voice is a low rumble, like stones grinding together. The star paths are clouded. The late rains have soured the soil. He looks up from the bronze plates, his gaze sweeping over the anxious faces. The gods are hesitant. The time for the final sowing is not yet upon us. To break the earth now would be to invite blight and appease spirits of famine. A younger man on the edge of the circle, a farmer named Brenos, shifts his weight. His hands are calloused, his knuckles thick from a life spent wrestling with the earth. He feels a knot of dread in his stomach. Last year, the druid signs had also been hesitant. The planting was delayed, and an early frost had stolen a quarter of his barley. His children had been thin all winter. He looks at Morvran with the respect due to a holy man, but a sliver of doubt, cold and sharp as a shard of flint, has found its way into his heart. Beyond the clearing, the world is changing. The tramp of hobnailed Caligai has replaced the soft footfalls of the hunter. Straight, gravel-paved roads, impossible and arrogant in their directness, now slice through ancient forests. The legions of Gaius Julius Caesar have come and gone, leaving a silence more profound than the din of battle. They left behind forts, tax collectors, and a new kind of order. An order that has its own time. Brenos has seen it. In the new Roman market town of Cenabum, a strange stone pillar stands in the dusty forum. It's a sundial, a solarium, that carves the day into 12 mercilessly equal parts, regardless of the season. He's seen the Roman quartermasters consulting their own calendars, simple wooden tablets with stark black letters, planning grain shipments with a confidence that borders on blasphemy. They do not consult the moon. They do not watch the flight of rooks. They consult a list of names, Januarius, Februarius, Martius, and act as if the seasons themselves have sworn an oath to the Senate and people of Rome. Morvran raises a sickle of gold, its curve mimicking the crescent moon. We will wait for the sign. We will listen to the whispers of the earth, not the barking of Roman dogs. The chieftains nod in agreement, their faith absolute. But Brenos looks past them, through the dense, dark woods. He imagines the straight Roman road, bathed in the unforgiving light of noon. He imagines the stone pillar, its shadow moving with cold, mathematical precision. The druid speaks of whispers, but Brenos can't help but wonder about the loud, clear, and terrifyingly simple voice of Roman time. Nuns of Januarius, 50 BCE. Cenabum. The Gallic town is being remade in Rome's image, one straight line at a time. The muddy, meandering paths of the old settlement are being brutally bisected by paved streets laid out with a groma, the surveyor's cross. The air, which in the forest was heavy with life and decay, here smells of sawdust, curing lime mortar, and the sharp, disciplined odor of Roman leather. In the newly constructed Praetorium, a stark building of timber and tile, sits Lucius Cornelius Scipio, a military tribune temporarily assigned to the thankless task of provincial administration. At 28, he possesses the lean, predatory stillness of a man who has spent more time on campaign with the 10th Legion Equestries than behind a desk. His face is clean-shaven, his dark hair cropped short. Before him, unrolled on a large oak table, is a papyrus scroll, its edges weighted down with polished riverstones. It is the edict, direct from the proconsul's office in Ravenna, detailing the full implementation of the Julian calendar. His clerk, a nervous Greek freedman named Demetrios, points a trembling finger at a column of figures. Tribune, the decree is absolute. All provincial affairs, taxation, market days, legal proceedings, and military levies are to be reconciled to this new count of days. Effective immediately. Lucius runs a hand over the scroll. He is not an astronomer, but he is a Roman. He understands order. He understands systems. The old calendar was a mess, a political football kicked between pontiffs in Rome to lengthen or shorten the terms of magistrates. Caesar, ever the pragmatist, had cut through the chaos with a sword. 365 days, with a leap day every 4 years. Simple, clean, efficient. It was a weapon, as surely as the gladius or the pilum. An empire cannot run on the whims of a fickle moon. An empire runs on schedules. It runs on the predictable delivery of grain, taxes, and men. It runs on time that can be commanded. Later that week, in the town's dusty forum, Lucius attempts to explain the unexplainable. He stands before a gathering of the local Gallic headmen, Brennos among them, drawn in from the fields by the summons. Lucius has no bronze plates, no golden sickle. He has a slate tablet and a piece of chalk. With Demetrios translating his blunt Latin into halting Gallic, he draws lines and numbers. The month of Martius will always have 31 days, he states, his voice flat and authoritative. A murmur ripples through the cloaked men. But the moon will not be full, one of the chieftains protests, his hand instinctively going to the torque at his neck. How can a month end before the moon has finished its journey? Lucius ignores him. The year begins on the calends of Januarius, in the cold time. This provokes outright laughter. The Gallic year began at Samhain, with the dying of the light, or at Beltane, with its rebirth. To start the year in the barren heart of winter was not just foolish, it was an ill omen, an invitation to death. Morvaran the Druid, who has been standing silently at the back, now steps forward. The crowd parts for him. He looks not at Lucius, but at the Romans' chalk drawing on the slate. You Romans, Morvaran says, his voice carrying easily across the forum, draw straight lines through our forests, and now you draw straight lines through the sky. You count the days, but you do not feel them. Your calendar is a cage for the seasons, built by men who fear the gods. The oak tree does not ask a Roman for permission to put forth its leaves. The salmon does not consult a calendar to run the rivers. We will plant when the earth is ready, not when a decree from a distant city tells us to. The Gauls roar their approval. They mock the Roman's sterile numbers, his unnatural months of fixed length, his arrogant attempt to chain the sun and moon. Brennos watches Lucius's face. The Roman tribune does not flush with anger or embarrassment. He shows no emotion at all. He simply waits for the noise to die down. When it does, he looks directly at Morvaran and speaks in Latin, letting Demetrios translate the cold, hard meaning. Your gods may command the oak tree. The Senate and people of Rome command the tax collector. The grain tithe will be assessed based on our calendar. It will be collected after our harvest. Those who cannot pay will have their land seized. That is all. He wipes the slate clean with the palm of his hand, turns, and strides back into the Praetorium, leaving the Gauls in a stunned, angry silence. The lines had not just been drawn. They had been drawn in the sand, separating two worlds, two ways of understanding time itself, and the harvest would be the judge, would. Calends of Aprilis, 50 before our era. The sun is a pale, reluctant disk in a vast, gray sky. A stubborn wind, carrying the last bite of winter, scours the fields around Cenabum. It whips Brennos's woolen cloak against him as he stands at the edge of his land, his boots sinking into the cold, sodden earth. In his hands, he crumbles a clod of soil. It is frigid and lifeless, clinging together in a miserable clump. The Roman month of Martius has come and gone. According to Lucius Scipio's Stark calendar, the time for spring planting was weeks ago. Brennos had watched the small group of Roman colony, veterans of the Gallic Wars granted plots of land near the town, turn their fields with methodical precision. He'd heard his neighbors laugh at them, calling them fools, who listened to ink on papyrus instead of the wisdom of the earth. But Morvran and the other druids had counseled patience. They had watched the skies, sacrificed a white bull under the new moon, and read the entrails. The signs remained clouded. The earth was not yet awake, they declared. The spirit of the soil still slept its winter dream. To sow now would be to throw precious seed into a grave. So the Gallic fields lay fallow, dark and silent under the endless drizzle. Brennos walks the boundary of his property. He sees the furrows dug by his father, and his father before him. He feels the weight of their knowledge, their traditions, their absolute faith in the old ways. Yet, a disquieting thought gnaws at him. The Romans were not farmers, but they were not fools either. They built bridges that defied rivers and siege engines that humbled the most formidable hill forts. They did not act on whims. Their confidence was a force of nature in itself. He looks over at the plot belonging to a veteran named Gaius Vibius. The man was a former centurion from the Legio 7, a tough, quiet man with a web of scars on his forearms. Where Brennos' field is barren mud, Vibius's land is already showing a faint, almost imperceptible haze of green. Tiny shoots of barley, no thicker than a thread, are pushing their way toward the weak sun. The sight sends a cold spike of fear through Brennos' gut, more chilling than the wind. It looks so fragile, so vulnerable. An act of supreme arrogance. A single hard frost, a common occurrence this early in the season, would kill it all. Morvran had predicted as much. The frost giants still hunt in the night, he had warned them. The Romans are planting a feast for them. That evening, in the longhouse that serves as the village's meeting hall, the air is thick with the smoke of the central fire and the smell of roasting mutton. The elders mutter amongst themselves, reaffirming their trust in the druids. They tell stories of past famines caused by impatient men who ignored the signs. The Romans count days, says an old chieftain, spitting a piece of gristle into the fire. We listen to the land knows. But doubt is a seed, and once planted, it is hard to root out. Brennos thinks of Gaius Vibius's field. He thinks of the Romans' calm, unhurried movements as he worked his land, as if he knew something Brennos did not. The Julian calendar wasn't just a list of days. It was a prediction, a promise. It claimed that this specific sequence of days, this Aprilis, was the correct time to sow, regardless of the cold wind or the damp earth. It was a statement of fact, not an interpretation of omens. Brennos feels trapped between two immense certainties, the ancient spiritual wisdom of his people and the cold, empirical logic of the conquerors. One was woven into the very fabric of his soul. The other demonstrated in the roads, the aqueducts, and the relentless success of the legions. He had laughed at the Roman calendar along with everyone else. But as he lies on his sleeping furs that night, listening to the wind howl outside, he is no longer laughing. He is afraid. Afraid that the fragile green shoots in the Romans' field represent a power his people can no longer afford to ignore. Edis of Quintilis, 50 before our era. The Gallic sky has forgotten how to weep. For weeks, it has been a vast, shimmering expanse of brilliant, brutal blue. The sun, no longer a pale disk, is now a relentless hammer of heat and light, beating down on the parched fields of Gaul. The earth, once a cold sponge, has baked into a cracked, dusty shell. Brennos' barley stands stunted and pathetic. Planted late, following the Druids' eventual go-ahead after the last spring frost had passed, the seeds had sprouted into a world that was already turning against them. The gentle spring rains they needed to thrive never came. Now the stalks are thin, the heads of grain small and withered. A dusty, yellowish-brown pallor hangs over his fields, the color of sickness and failure. When he walks through the crop, the dry stalks rustle with a brittle, mournful sound. The harvest will be a disaster. He will have enough to feed his family, perhaps, but the Roman tax, a fixed percentage of an expected yield, will be ruinous. One evening, driven by a despair he can no longer contain, he walks to the edge of his property and looks over at the land tilled by the veteran Gaius Vibius. The sight stops him dead. It is a vision from another world. Vibius's barley stands tall and thick, a dense sea of gold that ripples in the hot breeze. The stalks are robust, the heads of grain fat and heavy, bowed with their own weight. The Roman, working with his 2 sons, had planted according to the Julian calendar, gambling on a precise window of time. Their seeds had caught the last of the deep ground moisture from the winter melt, sprouting just before the rains ceased. Their roots had dug deep while the soil was still workable, reaching for water that Brenos's late-sown crop could never find. They had endured one final light frost that had blackened the tips of the shoots, but left the core alive, a risk the Roman system had somehow accounted for. As Brenos watches, Lucius Cornelius Scipio rides up on a gray cavalry mount, flanked by 2 legionary guards. He dismounts not in Brenos's field, but in Vibius's. The former centurion straightens up, wiping sweat from his brow with his forearm, and gives the tribune a nod of respect. Lucius plucks a head of barley from a stalk. He rolls the grains in his palm, his expression unreadable but professional, like an engineer inspecting the quality of a newly built wall. He isn't gloating. He is assessing. He is confirming data. "The yield looks strong, Vibius," Lucius says, his Latin carrying clearly on the still evening air. "You'll meet the tithe, and have a healthy surplus for the market in Cenabum." "The timing was good, Tribune," Vibius replies, his voice raspy from the dust. "Just as the proconsul's agronomists predicted. A dry summer, but the early start made all the difference." Agronomists. Predicted. The words strike Brenos like stones. This wasn't luck. It wasn't a fortunate blasphemy. It was a calculation. While Morvran was reading the future in the entrails of a bull, Roman specialists hundreds of miles away were studying weather patterns, soil conditions, and solar cycles, compiling them into a system of terrifying accuracy. The Julian calendar wasn't just a way to count days. It was a strategic manual for the conquest of nature itself. Time, for the Romans, was not a mystical flow to be appeased. It was a resource to be managed, a battlefield to be dominated. Lucius turns his gaze from Vibius's golden crop to Brenos's withered one. He looks across the boundary line at the Gallic farmer standing there, a silhouette of failure against the setting sun. Their eyes meet. There is no triumph in the Roman's expression, only a quiet, profound finality. He doesn't need to say a word. The fields have spoken for him. One system works. The other is a recipe for starvation. In that single, silent glance, Brenos understands that his world has been irrevocably broken. The whispers of the old moon have been drowned out by the thunderous, silent march of the Roman calendar. Calends of Sextilis, 50 before our era. The harvest season is a tale of 2 realities. In the Gallic fields, it is a time of grim faces and quiet desperation. Men, women, and children move through the blighted crops with dull-bladed sickles, their movements slow and weary. They salvage what they can, the meager grains filling their baskets with a dry, unsatisfying rattle. The yield is less than 1/2 of what is needed. There is no joy, no harvest song, only the rustle of dead stalks and the rising murmur of fear. How will they survive the winter? How will they pay the Roman tax? But on the lands tilled by the Roman colony, the scene is one of disciplined, triumphant industry. The air rings with the rhythmic swish of sharp steel through thick stalks and the hearty calls of men coordinating their efforts. Heavy wagons, their wheels groaning under the weight of golden barley and wheat, carve deep ruts in the dusty tracks leading to Cenabum. Gaius Vibius and the other veterans work with an efficiency that is almost military in its precision, their harvest a testament to the system they serve. In the Forum of Cenabum, the consequence of this division becomes brutally clear. A detachment from the garrison, commanded by a stern decurion, oversees the collection of the grain tithe. Lucius Scipio stands on the steps of the praetorium, a tablet and stylus in hand, observing the proceedings with a detached calm. He is not a cruel man, but he is an instrument of the Roman state, and the state demands its due. One by one, the Gallic farmers come forward, their wagons shamefully light. Brenos waits his turn, his stomach a tight knot of humiliation. He watches as the Roman quartermaster, a man with the cold eyes of a moneylender, inspects each wagon, weighs the grain on a large bronze scale, and marks the amount on a wax tablet. The shortfall is recorded without comment. When Brenos' turn comes, the quartermaster barely glances at his meager offering. He makes a notation and looks past him to the next man. The deficit is recorded, Brenos of the Aedui, the official states. It will be added to your tax burden for the next cycle with interest, or you can settle the debt now with livestock, 2 oxen or 10 sheep. Brenos feels the blood drain from his face. His oxen were his life. They pulled his plow, the very tools of his survival. To lose them would be to lose the ability to work his own land. He sees other farmers, his neighbors, leading away their prized animals, their faces masks of anguish. He sees Morvran the Druid standing at the edge of the forum, his expression clouded, his authority visibly crumbling before this new, inexorable power. His pronouncements on the will of the gods now seem like the ramblings of a madman in the face of this harsh, mathematical reality.